The year was 2247, and Captain Jake Morrison stood at the window of his ship, the Discovery, staring at the massive space station ahead. It was called Nexus Prime, and it was the biggest thing he had ever seen. The station floated in space like a small moon, covered in lights and docking ports. Ships of all shapes and sizes moved around it like bees around a hive. Jake felt nervous. Today was important. Today, humanity would meet the Galactic Council for the first time. After 200 years of space travel, humans had finally been invited to join the greater galactic community. It should have been exciting, but something in Jake's gut told him this would not be simple. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Grant checked her datapad for the 10th time. She was the ship's chief science officer, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a mind that never stopped working. She had spent months preparing for this meeting, learning everything she could about the alien species they would meet. "Are you ready?" Lisa asked. Jake nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." Commander Danny Wright, their pilot, walked into the room. He was young and confident, always smiling even when things got tough. "The docking procedure is complete. They're waiting for us." Helen Clark, their diplomatic officer, joined them. She carried a tablet with all the protocols and customs they needed to follow. Helen was careful and precise, the kind of person who never forgot a detail. "Remember, we represent all of Earth today. Let's make a good impression." The four of them left the ship and entered Nexus Prime. The corridors were wide and tall, built to accommodate species of different sizes. The walls glowed with a soft light and the air smelled strange, like metal and flowers mixed together. They followed a floating guide, a blob of gas that changed colors as it moved. It led them through the station until they reached a massive chamber. The doors opened and Jake's breath caught in his throat. The council chamber was enormous. It stretched up so high that Jake could barely see the ceiling. Around the room, hundreds of aliens sat in sections organized by species. There were creatures made of crystal that sparkled in the light. There were beings that floated in the air without bodies, just clouds of glowing gas. There were tall reptiles with scales that shifted colors, and small creatures that looked like insects but wore clothing and carried tools. The human delegation was shown to their section, a small platform near the middle of the room. As they walked, Jake noticed that many aliens turned to look at them. Some seemed curious. Others seemed unimpressed. A voice boomed through the chamber, speaking in perfect English through translation devices. "We welcome the humans of Earth to the Galactic Council. You are the newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel and peaceful contact. We hope you will learn much from the older civilizations here." The ceremony continued with speeches from various species. Each one talked about unity and cooperation. But Jake noticed something odd. One section of the chamber was almost empty. In the darkest corner, far from everyone else, sat a single figure. Jake squinted to see better. The figure was tall, maybe 8 feet, with dark gray fur covering its body. It looked like a wolf that walked on 2 legs. The creature wore simple clothes and sat perfectly still, watching the ceremony with amber eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. "Lisa," Jake whispered. "Who is that?" Lisa followed his gaze and checked her datapad. Her eyes widened. "That's a Lycoran. I read about them, but I didn't think we'd see one here. Why are they sitting alone? I don't know. The file didn't say much about them." After the ceremony ended, aliens began mingling in groups. The humans were approached by several species, each one offering polite greetings but not much else. It felt like they were being tested, measured, and found lacking. Jake kept looking at the lone Lycoran. The creature hadn't moved from its corner. No one approached it. In fact, when aliens walked past that section, they gave it a wide space as if afraid to get too close. Jake made a decision. He walked toward the corner, ignoring Helen's quiet protest. Lisa followed him, curious as always. As they got closer, Jake could see more details. The Lycoran was massive, with powerful muscles visible under the fur. Its face was long like a wolf's, with sharp teeth that showed when it breathed. The amber eyes tracked Jake's approach without blinking. "Hello," Jake said, holding out his hand. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison of Earth." The Lycoran stared at his hand for a long moment. Around them, other aliens stopped talking and watched. Some whispered to each other. The atmosphere grew tense. Finally, the Lycoran reached out and shook Jake's hand. Its grip was strong but careful. "I am Kale, representative of the Lycoran people." His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "It's good to meet you," Jake said. This is Dr. Lisa Grant, our science officer. Lisa nodded respectfully. Hello. Kale seemed surprised by their friendliness. You are either very brave or very foolish to approach me, humans. Most species avoid my kind. Why? Lisa asked directly. Kale's expression was hard to read, but Jake thought he saw sadness there. Because we are considered ugly. Because we look like monsters to most galactic species. Because we come from a region of space that no one cares about. Before Jake could respond, their gas blob guide floated over quickly, changing colors rapidly. It spoke in a worried tone. Humans, perhaps you should return to your delegation. The Lycorans are not, well, they are not the best company for newcomers. Why not? Jake asked, not moving. The guide hesitated. They are primitive, barely worthy of council membership. They achieved space travel only 1,000 years ago, and their technology is crude. Their appearance is considered frightening by most civilized species. It is better to associate with more advanced peoples. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. He had spent his whole career in space meeting new people and learning new things. He knew prejudice when he saw it. I think we can decide for ourselves who to talk to, thanks. The guide changed to a dark red color and floated away quickly. Kyle watched this exchange with those glowing eyes. You have made enemies already, Captain Morrison. The other species will remember that you defended us. Good, Jake said. Let them remember. Lisa was scanning Kale with a small device. Your biology is fascinating. You're warm-blooded, clearly intelligent, and your muscle structure suggests evolution on a high-gravity world. Your observations are correct, Kyle said. Our homeworld is harsh. We had to be strong to survive. Danny and Helen joined them, looking worried. Captain, the council administrators want to speak with us, Helen said. We should probably go. Jake nodded but turned back to Kale. Where is your homeworld? Maybe we could visit sometime. Kale's eyes showed genuine surprise. Our territory is called the Howling Expanse. It is far from here in a region most species ignore. If you truly wish to visit, you would be the first non-Lycoran guests in 500 years. Then we'll be the first, Jake said. I look forward to learning more about your people. As the human delegation left the chamber, Jake looked back once. Kale still sat in the dark corner, but now he was standing, watching them leave. For just a moment, Jake saw something in those amber eyes that looked like hope. That night, back on the Discovery, Lisa compiled her notes on the meeting. She pulled up everything she could find about the Lycorans. The files were thin, barely more than basic information. They came from a region called the Howling Expanse. They had 3 inhabited planets. They had been part of the Council for 800 years but rarely participated in galactic affairs. What interested Lisa most was what the files didn't say. There was no cultural information, no scientific exchanges, no trade agreements. It was as if the Lycorans existed on the edges of civilization, present but ignored. What do you think? Jake asked, looking over her shoulder. I think, Lisa said slowly, that the galaxy has judged these people without knowing them. And I think there's more to them than anyone realizes. Jake smiled. Then let's find out what everyone else is missing. The Discovery received its next assignment 3 days later. They would be mapping star systems in the Howling Expanse, a region that had been largely unexplored by other galactic species. It seemed like a boring job, but Jake suspected it was also a test. The Council wanted to see what humans would do when given a task no one else wanted. Jake didn't care about tests. He cared about what they might discover. As the Discovery left Nexus Prime and set course for Lycoran space, he had a feeling their journey was about to become much more interesting than anyone expected. The Howling Expanse lived up to its name. As the Discovery entered the region, sensors showed dozens of star systems that had never been properly mapped by the Galactic Council. Space here looked different, filled with purple and blue nebulas that glowed in the darkness. It was beautiful in a wild way, untamed and mysterious. Danny sat at the pilot's controls, steering them toward the coordinates Kale had provided. I don't understand why no one comes here. This region is full of resources. There are mineral-rich asteroids everywhere. Helen looked up from her station. I've been reading the Council reports. They say this region is difficult to navigate and not worth the effort. But the data doesn't support that. The navigation is actually easier than many approved trade routes. So they avoid it because of the Lycorans, Lisa said. It wasn't a question. Jake stood at the center of the bridge, arms crossed. He had been thinking about this for days. The more he learned about how the galaxy treated the Lycarans, the angrier he became. These people had done nothing wrong except look different and keep to themselves. A signal came through their communication system. It was Kale's voice. "Human vessel discovery. This is Lycaran patrol ship Silver Fang. We have been expecting you. Please follow our vector to the homeworld of Silver Moon." "Good to hear from you, Kyle," Jake responded. "We're ready to follow." The Silver Fang appeared on their screens. It was unlike any ship Jake had seen before. Instead of the smooth geometric designs favored by most galactic species, the Lycaran ship had flowing curves that looked almost organic. It reminded Jake of a wolf in mid-run, all grace and power. Danny whistled. "That's one beautiful ship." They followed the Silver Fang through the system until a planet appeared ahead. Silver Moon was smaller than Earth, but covered in forests and oceans. White clouds swirled over the continents, and even from space, Jake could see that the planet was alive with green growth. As they descended through the atmosphere, the crew pressed against the windows to see. Cities dotted the landscape, but they were unlike any human or galactic city. The buildings seemed to grow from the land itself, blending architecture with nature. Trees grew between structures and green spaces filled every area. It looked more like a garden than a civilization. "This is incredible," Lisa breathed. "They've achieved complete environmental integration. No pollution, no urban sprawl, just harmony." The Discovery landed at a spaceport that was really more of a large clearing in a forest. Lycaran ships rested between the trees and people moved through the area with purpose. As the human crew disembarked, they got their first good look at the Lycarans. There were hundreds of them, all different sizes and colors. Some had gray fur like Kale. Others were brown or black or even white. They walked on two legs like humans, but their movements were fluid and powerful. Many wore simple clothes that left their arms and legs free. They worked, talked, and laughed together, their deep voices creating a sound like distant thunder. Kyle met them at the bottom of the ramp. "Welcome to Silver Moon, home of my people. You're the first human visitors we have ever received." Jake shook his hand firmly. "Thank you for having us." "Your world is beautiful." Kyle's expression softened. "Come. High Alpha Maya wishes to meet you." They were led through the city on foot. Jake noticed that Lycaran technology was everywhere, but it was subtle. Lights that seemed to come from nowhere illuminated the paths at night. Vehicles moved silently on magnetic tracks between the trees. Communication devices were built into jewelry and clothing. The technology was advanced, just different from what the galaxy usually used. The High Alpha's residence was a large building grown from living trees, their trunks twisted together to form walls and a roof. Inside it was warm and comfortable, filled with natural light. Maya stood waiting for them. She was tall and powerful, with silver fur that showed her age. Her eyes were sharp and intelligent, and she carried herself with the bearing of someone who had led her people for many years. Beside her stood Connor, an older Lycaran with white fur and kind eyes. He was introduced as their chief historian. "Humans," Maya said, her voice strong and clear. "You honor us with your presence. Sit. We have prepared food and drink for you." The dinner was held in a large hall where light filtered through leaves overhead. The food was surprisingly good, plant-based dishes that had been seasoned perfectly. As they ate, the Lycarans asked many questions about Earth and humanity. They seemed genuinely interested in learning about the newest species to join the galactic community. Danny was examining a device on the table, a small orb that projected three-dimensional images. "Your technology is impressive. Different from what we saw at the council, but maybe more elegant. We develop our own tools," Connor explained. "The galaxy offers standardized technology, but we prefer to build what suits our needs." Lisa had been quiet, but now she spoke up. "I noticed something on our approach. Your astronomical charts don't match the standard galactic ones. The star positions are different." The room went silent. Maya and Kale exchanged glances. Connor's expression became serious. The friendly atmosphere shifted to something heavier. "You are observant, Dr. Grant," Maya said slowly. "Very few visitors would notice such a detail. Even fewer would mention it." "I'm sorry if I said something wrong," Lisa said quickly. Connor shook his head. "No, child. You said something right. The question is whether you are ready to hear the answer." Jake leaned forward. "We came here with open minds. Whatever you want to tell us, we'll listen." Maya studied them for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Very well. Connor, show them." The old historian stood and gestured for them to follow. They left the hall and walked deeper into the building until they reached a door carved with symbols. Connor placed his hand on it and the door opened silently. Beyond was a staircase leading down into the mountain itself. The walls glowed with soft light as they descended. They walked for what felt like hours, going deeper and deeper into the earth. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. Jake's eyes widened. The chamber was enormous, carved from solid rock. But what filled it took his breath away. Crystals, thousands of them, covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Each crystal glowed from within, and images moved across their surfaces. Star charts, mathematical equations, historical records. It was an archive, but unlike anything humanity had ever built. "This is the Hall of Memory," Connor said quietly. "This is where we keep the truth." Lisa walked to the nearest crystal and touched it gently. Images flowed across its surface, showing star systems and civilizations that she didn't recognize. "How old is this?" "Millions of years," Connor replied. Helen laughed nervously. "That's impossible. You said your people only achieved space travel 1,000 years ago." "We said that because it is what the galaxy believes," Maya said, stepping forward. "The truth is much older and much more complicated." Kale stood beside Jake. "What we are about to tell you, only a handful of outsiders have ever heard. The Council thinks we are primitives, young and ugly and barely worthy of their attention. We have let them believe this lie for a very long time." "Why?" Jake asked. "Because the truth would change everything," Connor said. He touched another crystal and it projected an image into the center of the room. It showed a galaxy, but not as it looked now. This was older, different. Long ago, before any of the current galactic species achieved space travel, there was another civilization. They called themselves the Guardians. They were the first to reach the stars in this galaxy. Lisa was recording everything, her hands shaking slightly. "The Guardians. Are there records of them in the galactic archives?" "No," Maya said. "They were forgotten deliberately. The Guardians were our ancestors. We are what remains of that great civilization." Danny shook his head. "But you look like wolves. How did an advanced civilization become primitives?" Cal finished, his voice hard. "That is the question the galaxy should have asked, but they were too busy judging our appearance to wonder why we looked this way." Connor continued. "The Guardians were powerful. They built cities that touched the clouds. They traveled between stars as easily as you walk between rooms. They understood physics and mathematics in ways the current galactic civilization is only beginning to discover. But they discovered something else as well, something terrible." The image changed, showing the center of the galaxy. A darkness swirled there, growing larger. "At the core of our galaxy exists an entity. The Guardians called it the Devourer. It is not a black hole or a natural phenomenon. It is alive. It is conscious. And it hunts." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What does it hunt?" "Civilizations," Maya said simply. "Every 5 million years the Devourer awakens. It spreads through the galaxy, seeking out advanced civilizations. It feeds on them, consuming their life force, their technology, their very existence. When it has eaten its fill, it returns to the core and sleeps again." Helen's face had gone pale. "That's what happened to the Guardians." "No," Connor said. "The Guardians survived, but they had to change everything they were to do it. They discovered that the Devourer hunts by sensing advanced technology and large population centers. It is drawn to the kind of civilizations the galaxy celebrates, the cities of crystal and metal, the ships that tear through space, the minds connected by networks of light." For 3 days, the human crew stayed in the Hall of Memory, learning everything the Lycarans could teach them about the Devourer. Connor guided them through millions of years of preserved history, showing them records that would have been impossible to fake. The evidence was overwhelming and terrifying. Lisa barely slept. She spent every moment studying the ancient Guardian technology, trying to understand the science behind what she was seeing. The mathematics was complex but sound. The astronomical observations matched patterns she could verify with the Discovery's own sensors. Everything pointed to the same conclusion. The galaxy was in danger, and no one knew it. On the 3rd night, Connor showed them something new. He led them to a different section of the archive where older, darker crystals waited. "This is the hardest part of the story," he said quietly. "This is what the Guardians learned about the Devourer before they chose their path." The crystal activated, showing images that made Jake's blood run cold. He saw worlds dying, their surfaces turning gray and lifeless as something dark passed over them. He saw ships torn apart by forces that looked like cracks in space itself. He saw entire civilizations reaching out for help that never came. The Devourer does not kill quickly, Connor explained. It feeds slowly, drawing out the life force over years or even decades. The victims know what is happening. They watch their technology fail, their people weaken, their worlds grow dark. But they cannot stop it. The more they fight with their advanced weapons and powerful shields, the more it is drawn to them. Maya joined them, her silver fur seeming to glow in the crystal light. The Guardians tried everything. They built weapons that could crack planets. They created shields that could withstand the heat of stars. They even tried to move entire populations to other galaxies. Nothing worked. The Devourer is not a creature that can be fought with force. It is something else, something older than our understanding. Then how did they survive? Danny asked. He had been quiet for days, trying to process everything he was learning. By understanding what the Devourer truly is, Connor said. He pulled up new images, showing complex energy readings and dimensional mathematics. The Guardians spent thousands of years studying it. They eventually realized that the Devourer is not evil. It is not even malicious. It is a cosmic organism, like a whale feeding on krill in Earth's oceans. It simply follows its nature. Lisa's eyes widened. It feeds on organized energy. Advanced civilizations create huge amounts of organized energy. Through their technology, their communications, their very thoughts connected through networks. To the Devourer, that energy is food. Exactly, Connor said with approval. The Guardians discovered that the Devourer senses its prey through these energy patterns. A city of crystal towers sends out signals that draw it like a beacon. A fleet of starships leaves trails it can follow. Even large populations of connected minds create ripples that it can detect. Jake was beginning to understand. So the Guardians changed themselves to stop sending those signals. They made themselves invisible by becoming primitive. Not primitive, Kale corrected gently. Different. We still have technology, but we design it to blend with natural energy patterns. We still have cities, but they grow from living things that mask our presence. We still have advanced minds, but we keep them separate, each one individual, rather than connected in ways the Devourer can sense. Maya touched another crystal, and it showed the transformation of the Guardians into the Licorans. This was not an easy choice. Imagine being at the height of civilization and choosing to give it all up. Imagine having technology that could shape worlds and deciding to live in forests instead. Imagine being connected to billions of minds through instant communication and choosing to be alone with your own thoughts. But they did it to survive, Helen said softly. They did it so life could survive, Maya corrected. The Guardians knew they could not save everyone. But they could save the knowledge, the history, the warning for future generations. They hoped that someday when the cycle came around again, someone would listen. Connor brought up the current timeline, showing calculations that made Lisa gasp. According to our measurements, the Devourer is already beginning to stir. We detected the first signs 3 months ago. Small fluctuations in energy at the galactic core, unusual gravitational waves, darkness spreading where there should be light. It moves slowly at first, but once it fully awakens, it will spread fast. How fast? Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. The last time it consumed the inner galactic regions within 20 years. It reached the outer arms within 50. By the time 100 years had passed, 90% of advanced civilizations were gone. Danny rubbed his face with both hands. And the current galaxy has no idea. They're going to be completely unprepared. Yes, Kale said, which is why we need you. The Licorans have tried to warn them for centuries. They dismiss us as primitives telling ghost stories. But you are humans, new and eager and trusted because you have no history. If you tell them, they might listen. Jake thought about the Galactic Council, about the proud species who had looked down on both humans and Licorans. They won't believe us either, not without proof. Lisa stood up, her eyes bright with determination. Then we give them proof. Connor, can you share this data with us? All of it. Everything you have on the Devourer, the cycles, the energy signatures? Of course, Connor said. That is why we showed you. Take it all, study it, verify it with your own science, then show it to your people. The next morning, the Discovery prepared to leave Silvermoon. The ship's computers were filled with terabytes of data from the Hall of Memory. Lisa and her team had worked through the night, translating Guardian science into formats that human technology could use. Before they departed, Maya called them to a final meeting. With her stood other Lycoran leaders, including Vincent, the High Alpha of the Northern Pax. He was younger than Maya but carried himself with equal authority. We are trusting you with our greatest secret, Maya said. For millions of years, the Lycorans have kept this knowledge hidden, waiting for the right moment to share it. We believe that moment has come. Vincent stepped forward. If the galaxy will not listen to warnings, then we must take action ourselves. There is a Guardian installation beneath Silvermoon's surface, dormant for 5 million years. It was designed to help repel the Devourer, not by fighting it, but by creating a frequency that causes it pain. The Guardians understood that you cannot kill such an entity, but you can make certain regions uncomfortable for it to feed in. Like a pest repellent, Danny said, then looked embarrassed at the comparison. But Vincent smiled, showing his sharp teeth. Exactly like that, young pilot. The installation can project this frequency across several star systems, creating a safe zone that the Devourer will avoid. However, activating it requires enormous energy and careful timing. We must wait until the Devourer is close enough to sense it, but not so close that it can attack before we finish the activation sequence. Cale handed Jake a small device. This contains the activation codes and technical specifications for the installation. It also has designs for smaller emitters that can be built into ships and stations. If we can create a network of these emitters across the galaxy, we can protect far more people. But we need help, Maya said. The Lycorans alone do not have the resources or population to build enough emitters in time. We need allies. We need species who will believe and act quickly. Jake took the device carefully. We'll do everything we can. I promise you that. As the Discovery lifted off from Silvermoon, Jake stood at the window watching the planet shrink below them. Kyle had come aboard to accompany them back to human space, serving as a liaison between their peoples. The tall Lycoran stood beside Jake, his amber eyes reflecting the light of the distant sun. You are taking a great risk by helping us, Kale said quietly. The galaxy may not thank you. They may think you are as foolish as they think we are. Then we'll be foolish together, Jake replied. Besides, I've learned something these past few days. The galaxy's opinion doesn't matter as much as the truth. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. During that time, Lisa worked with Cale to verify every piece of data they had received. She ran simulations, checked calculations, and compared the Guardian observations with current astronomical data. Every test confirmed what the Lycorans had said. The Devourer was real and it was waking up. When they finally entered the Sol system, Earth looked beautiful and fragile, hanging in the darkness of space. Jake thought about the billions of people living there, going about their lives with no idea of what was coming. The weight of knowledge pressed on him like a physical force. They were directed to Stellar Command, Earth's central military headquarters located on a massive space station orbiting the moon. Admiral Christine Baker met them personally. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had earned her position through decades of service. She listened to their initial report without interruption, her face showing no emotion. Let me understand this correctly, Admiral Baker said when they finished. You're telling me that in roughly 50 years, possibly less, an enormous cosmic entity is going to emerge from the galactic core and destroy most. The first system died on a Tuesday morning Earth time. It was a Veltheran colony, home to 3 million crystalline beings who lived in towers that reached toward the sky. The towers went dark all at once. The communications stopped. When scout ships arrived to investigate 3 days later, they found empty structures and silent cities. The Veltherans were simply gone, leaving nothing behind but their empty homes. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. The Veltheran ambassador who had mocked Jake and Cale now stood before them, his crystalline body dim with grief. They cannot be dead, he insisted. There are no bodies. There is no sign of attack. They are just gone, but Jake knew better. He had seen this in the ancient Guardian records. The Devourer did not kill in ways other species understood. It simply consumed, taking the life force and leaving everything else behind. A week later, 2 more systems went silent. Then 5, then 12. The darkness spreading from the galactic core became visible even to species who had dismissed it as natural phenomena. It moved like a living thing, reaching out with tendrils of dark energy that snuffed out stars and civilizations alike. Panic spread through the galaxy faster than the Devourer itself. Species that had laughed at human warnings now begged for help. The communication channels were flooded with desperate requests for the emitter technology, for advice, for any hope of survival. Admiral Baker set up a command center on the lunar station. She coordinated with Maya and the other Lycaran leaders, managing what had become the largest refugee and defense operation in galactic history. Jake was promoted to admiral and given command of the Guardian Fleet, a joint force of human and Lycaran ships equipped with the emitter technology. The Guardian Fleet had a single mission: evacuate people from threatened systems and guide them to protected zones. It was desperate work. Every day brought news of more worlds going dark. Every night Jake stared at star charts showing the Devourer's advance, calculating how much time they had left. The fleet worked miracles. Ships equipped with the hybrid emitters could move through space that the Devourer had already touched, invisible to its senses. They reached colonies that other species had abandoned as lost and pulled survivors to safety. Millions were saved, but billions more could not be reached in time. Danny Wright became one of the fleet's best evacuation pilots. He developed techniques for moving large numbers of refugees quickly and safely. His ship, the Silver Star, made over 200 rescue runs in the first 6 months of the crisis. Dr. Lisa Grant worked with Connor to refine the emitter technology, making it more efficient and easier to produce. They set up manufacturing facilities on dozens of worlds, teaching other species how to build the devices. Some species learned quickly. Others struggled with technology so different from their own. Through it all, Jake and Cale stood together at the center of the storm. They coordinated fleet movements, made impossible decisions about which systems to prioritize, and bore the weight of every life they could not save. One night, exhausted after a particularly difficult day, Jake sat with Cale in the command center observation deck. Outside, ships moved constantly, a river of vessels carrying refugees to safety. "We're losing," Jake said quietly. "We're saving millions, but the Devourer is taking billions." Kyle's amber eyes reflected the lights of the passing ships. The Guardians lost too at first. They tried to save everyone and realized they could not, so they chose to save what they could and ensure that life would continue. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No," Cale said honestly. "It is supposed to help you understand that you are doing everything possible." No one could ask for more. The Galactic Council, or what remained of it, finally accepted reality. They formally apologized to the Lycorans for centuries of dismissal, and to humanity for ignoring their warnings. It was a hollow gesture. Apologies could not bring back the dead or restore the lost civilizations, but something else was happening too. The species who had survived by listening to the warnings were forming new bonds. Humans worked alongside Lycorans, who worked alongside species that had once considered them both beneath notice. The crisis was forging alliances that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. 18 months after the Devourer's awakening, it reached the outer edges of human and Lycoran space. The time had come to activate the Guardian installation on Silvermoon. Maya stood in the ancient facility deep beneath the planet's surface. With her were Vincent and other Lycoran leaders who would help channel the enormous energy required. Human technicians led by Ryan Phillips and Kevin Frost monitored the systems, making sure everything worked as the ancient designs intended. Jake and Admiral Baker watched from the command center, linked by communications to the installation below. Lisa stood beside them, her fingers flying over controls as she coordinated with sites across the galaxy. "All secondary emitter stations are online," Lisa reported. Over the past months, they had built smaller versions of the Guardian installation on 70 different worlds, creating a network that stretched across 3 major spiral arms of the galaxy. "When Silvermoon activates, they'll amplify the signal." Maya's voice came through the speakers. "We are ready. The installation has been dormant for 5 million years, but the systems are responding. It remembers its purpose. Then let's remind the Devourer why the Guardians built it." Admiral Baker said. The activation sequence began. Deep beneath Silvermoon, ancient technology came to life. Energy flowed through channels carved from solid rock, building to levels that would have destroyed any modern device. But Guardian engineering had been built to last ages, and it held firm. On the surface, the sky began to glow. Light burst from the mountain where the installation was hidden, spreading in waves across the planet. Other worlds with secondary emitters lit up in sequence, creating a web of light across the darkness of space. The frequency they generated was beyond human hearing, beyond normal senses entirely. It existed on a dimensional level where the devourer could feel it. And the entity felt pain. The darkness that had been spreading relentlessly suddenly stopped. The tendrils reaching toward protected systems pulled back as if burned. Space itself seemed to ripple as the devourer recoiled from the frequency that caused it such discomfort. "It's working," Kevin said, his voice filled with wonder. "The devourer is avoiding the protected zones." But the battle was not over. The entity began moving around the protected areas, seeking easier prey. Systems outside the network continued to go dark. The devourer was learning, adapting, finding ways to feed despite the pain. Admiral Baker made a hard decision. They could not protect everyone, but they could create corridors through which refugees could safely travel. The Guardian fleet began a new mission, guiding entire civilizations through the network of protected zones to safety. The evacuation of the inner galaxy became the largest migration in history. Billions of beings from hundreds of species fled their homeworlds, moving outward through the safe corridors toward the galactic rim where the devourer had not yet reached. Jake commanded the fleet from his flagship, the Pathfinder, coordinating thousands of ships in a desperate race against time. Kale stood beside him, using his knowledge of ancient Guardian routes to find paths others could not see. They saved entire species that would otherwise have been lost. They created safe zones where civilization could continue. They held the line against cosmic horror with nothing but ancient knowledge and desperate courage. 3 years after the Devourer's awakening, it finally began to slow. Having consumed vast amounts of energy from the inner galaxy, the entity grew sated. The ancient records had predicted this. The Devourer fed until it had enough, then began the long process of returning to the galactic core to sleep once more. As it retreated, the darkness slowly receded. Stars that had been hidden emerged again, but the civilizations that had lived near them were gone, consumed completely. The final toll was staggering. 60% of galactic civilizations had been destroyed or severely damaged. Trillions had died. Entire species had been erased from existence. The proud galaxy that had dismissed human and Lycoran warnings had paid a terrible price for its arrogance. But the remaining 40% had survived. Protected by the emitter network and guided by the Guardian fleet, billions had been saved who would otherwise have been lost. And they knew who they owed their survival to. The reformed Galactic Council met on a new station built in the outer rim, far from the devastation. The chamber was smaller now, with many seats empty, but the species who remained looked at each other with new understanding. They had learned the hard way that appearance and age meant nothing compared to wisdom and courage. Ambassador Helen Clark stood to address the council, representing humanity. Beside her stood Quinn, a young Lycoran diplomat who represented his people. The two species who had been dismissed as primitive and naive now commanded the respect of the entire surviving galaxy. "We gather here in the shadow of great loss," Helen said, her voice carrying through the quiet chamber. "We mourn those who were taken. We remember the civilizations that fell, but we also celebrate those who survived and those who made survival possible." Quinn continued, his deep voice solemn. "The Lycarans kept the ancient knowledge for 5 million years, waiting for the day when it would be needed. Known civilizations, and your source for this information is a species the rest of the galaxy considers primitive." "Yes, ma'am," Jake said firmly. "But I've seen the Joint Chiefs meeting lasted 12 hours. Jake presented everything they had learned, every piece of data, every ancient record. Lisa gave a detailed scientific analysis. Kyle explained the history of the Guardians and the nature of the Devourer. When they finished, the room fell into heavy silence. General Patrick Hayes, head of Earth's Defense Forces, spoke first. "This is beyond anything we've ever faced. If this Devourer is real, we're talking about a threat that makes war look like a schoolyard fight." "It is real," Lisa insisted. She pulled up star charts showing energy readings from the galactic core. These measurements were taken by our own deep space probes. The data matches the Lycoran predictions exactly. Something massive is stirring at the center of the galaxy. Admiral Baker nodded. Then we need to act. Even if the rest of the galaxy won't listen, Earth must prepare. What do you recommend? Kyle stepped forward. The Guardian installation on Silvermoon must be activated when the time comes. But we also need to build a network of smaller emitters, devices that can be installed on ships and stations throughout human space. These will create safe zones where the Devourer cannot easily feed. How long to build these emitters? Admiral Baker asked. With human manufacturing capabilities and Lycoran technical knowledge, we could have the first prototypes in 3 months, Lisa said. Full deployment across human territory would take 2 years. Then we start immediately, the Admiral decided. I'm authorizing a joint program between Earth and the Lycoran people. This will be classified at the highest level until we know more. Jake raised his hand. Admiral, with respect, keeping this secret won't help. We need to warn the Galactic Council. And we will, Admiral Baker said. But we're going to do it properly. We'll present them with evidence they can't ignore, and solutions they can use. We'll show them we're serious, not just spreading panic. Over the next 6 months, something remarkable happened. Human engineers and Lycoran technicians worked together to understand the ancient Guardian technology. A research facility was established in the Howling Expanse where teams from both species could collaborate freely. Jake watched the partnership grow with pride. At first, the humans had been nervous around the Lycorans, intimidated by their size and unfamiliar appearance. But working together broke down those barriers quickly. The Lycorans were patient teachers, sharing knowledge that had been preserved for millions of years. The humans brought fresh perspectives and innovative ideas that sometimes surprised even the ancient species. One of the lead human engineers was Ryan Phillips, a creative builder who could look at a problem and see solutions others missed. He worked closely with a Lycoran named Mira, whose family had been maintaining Guardian technology for thousands of years. Together, they created the first hybrid shield emitter that could mask a ship's energy signature from the Devourer's senses. The trick is not to eliminate the energy, Ryan explained during a demonstration, but to make it look natural, like hiding a flashlight by holding it next to a campfire. The Devourer sees so much natural energy in the universe that it ignores anything that seems to blend with that background pattern. Another collaboration paired Dr. Kevin Frost, a theoretical physicist, with Connor, the Lycoran historian. Kevin specialized in dimensional mathematics, and Connor knew the Guardian equations better than anyone alive. Together they began translating ancient defensive protocols into modern applications. The Guardians understood dimensions in ways we're only beginning to grasp, Kevin said in one of his reports. They knew that the Devourer exists partially outside normal space. That's why conventional weapons can't hurt it. You can't shoot something that's only half there. But the frequency emitters worked on a different principle. They created vibrations that affected the Devourer across multiple dimensions, causing it discomfort without requiring direct contact. It was elegant science based on deep understanding rather than brute force. Jake spent much of his time with Kale, and they became close friends. Despite their different backgrounds, they shared similar experiences of being outsiders and having to prove themselves. Jake learned about Lycoran culture, their traditions of pack loyalty and honor, their deep connection to nature, and their fierce dedication to protecting life. One evening, sitting in the observation deck of the research station, Kale told Jake about the sacrifice his ancestors had made. Imagine knowing everything, being connected to vast networks of knowledge and choosing to forget most of it. The Guardians who became the first Lycorans gave up their accumulated wisdom, their comfortable lives, their very identities. They did it knowing they would never see the results of their sacrifice. But they saved their species, Jake said. They saved more than that, Kale replied. They saved the possibility of future life. They trusted that someday, millions of years later, their descendants would find allies who would believe them. We believe you, Jake said firmly, and we won't let you down. The first prototype emitters were tested successfully in month 4. The devices worked exactly as the ancient Guardian designs predicted. Ships equipped with them became nearly invisible to the kinds of sensors the Devourer would use to detect prey. But success in the laboratory was only the first step. The harder challenge was convincing the Galactic Council to take action. In month 7, Jake and Kale returned to Nexus Prime. They were accompanied by Admiral Baker herself, along with a team of scientists carrying mountains of data. The council had agreed to hear their presentation, though many species had protested giving time to what they called primitive superstition. The council chamber looked exactly as Jake remembered it, filled with proud species sitting in their designated sections. But this time something was different. Instead of sitting in the dark corner alone, Kale stood beside Jake at the human delegation platform. They faced the council together. Jake's presentation was clear and direct. He explained what they had discovered, showed the evidence, and demonstrated the working emitter technology. Lisa followed with detailed scientific analysis. Admiral Baker presented Earth's plan to deploy the emitters throughout human space and offered to share the technology with any species that wanted it. When they finished, the chamber erupted in chaos. The Veltheran ambassador, a crystalline being that sparkled under the light, spoke first. His voice dripped with contempt. "This is absurd. The humans have been members of this council for less than a year, and already they're spreading panic based on the myths of a primitive species. This devourer is nothing but a story the Lycarans tell to make themselves seem important." A Saurian representative agreed. "We have studied the galactic core for thousands of years. There is no evidence of any such entity. These energy fluctuations the humans mention are normal stellar phenomena." Jake tried to respond, but the voices talking over him grew louder. Species after species dismissed their warnings. Some were polite about it, suggesting the humans had been deceived. Others were openly hostile, accusing Earth of trying to gain power through fear. Only a few smaller species listened with interest, but they had little influence in council matters. The Zephyron Chancellor, one of the most powerful voices in the council, finally called for order. When the chamber quieted, he addressed Jake directly. "Captain Morrison, we appreciate your enthusiasm. However, this council operates on evidence and reason, not ancient legends. The Lycarans have been telling this story for centuries. We have investigated their claims many times. There is no devourer." "Then explain the energy readings," Lisa said, her voice shaking with frustration. She pulled up the data again. "These are from your own deep space monitoring systems. The patterns match the ancient Guardian predictions exactly." "Coincidence," the Chancellor said dismissively. "Space is full of patterns. You are seeing meaning where there is none." Kale stood tall, his voice carrying across the chamber. "You do not believe because you do not want to believe. It is easier to think we are primitives than to face that your civilizations might be in danger." The Veltheran ambassador laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Or perhaps we simply recognize ignorance when we see it. Your people huddle in forests and tell ghost stories. You are barely civilized. Why should we trust anything you say?" Admiral Baker's face went red with anger. "Because they've been right about everything else. The Lycarans aren't primitive. They're survivors of something you can't even imagine. And if you're too blind to see that, then you deserve what's coming." The council erupted again, this time with many species shouting at the human delegation. The session ended in chaos, with the Chancellor dismissing their presentation as unfounded speculation. As they left the chamber, Jake felt defeated. They had the truth, the evidence, the technology, but none of it mattered if no one would listen. Kale placed a hand on his shoulder. "I warned you this would happen." "Then what do we do?" Jake asked. Admiral Baker answered. "We do what we planned from the beginning. We protect our own people and anyone else smart enough to listen. The council can dismiss us all they want. When the devourer comes, we'll be ready." Back in human space, Earth's government made a controversial decision. If the Galactic Kunvid,